Oh my god, who is that? Is that Mo Sports Network? Is he really here? Is he back? Kind of. I don't really intend on being back, but we can do a mock draft. We do one of these every year. These are the big gaps in my channel's history. You can see like mock draft 2017 and mock draft 2018 being, the two back-to-back videos, something along those lines. But I've been cooking a little bit, so we're gonna go ahead and just do one. This is gonna be a bit of a, last year was fairly unresearched. And this one is, not as researched as some of my previous ones. I think the COVID ones in particular, I actually had time to do some, all 22 scouting or whatever, as they say. And I just didn't really get access to that this year, but I watch a lot of college football, so I feel like I can at least have some sort of an opinion here in a world of a bunch of people who also have opinions who don't matter. Mine's probably, if you were to weight it, mine probably matters the least out of all of the mock drafts that you're going to watch. But at least I'm going to, give my 2 cents and hopefully not just, mimic the same things that everyone's already heard. And that's a good segue into taking Bryce Young at pick number 1 for the Panthers. My quarterbacks, it's an interesting decision here because I think in the NFC, all four of these guys in the NFC probably step in and have a chance to be like a top 5 NFC quarterback off rip. I don't. I'm not super. I don't like have all the NFC quarterbacks in front of me, but like the NFC North, I feel like there's no one super special. In the West, Brock Purdy was the division winner last year, and Geno Smith of all people seemed to look really excellent. The South, that's just a dumpster fire on its own, and Bryce Young's probably automatically the best quarterback in that division. And then over in the East, you have Jalen Hurts, and I guess Dak if you really want to gas him up. But it's really interesting seeing the quarterbacks there, and Bryce Young steps in, and I think he's a top 5 quarterback in the conference, and can help the Panthers compete for the playoffs. Now, on the other hand, we go to the Texans, and I think the AFC is a complete opposite issue. To just even think about competing in the AFC, here are the quarterbacks you have to go through. Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen. We have Mr. Chokes in the playoffs, but is still great, Justin Herbert, and Mr. Beat, the guy who choked in the playoffs, Trevor Lawrence. Another guy who doesn't do very well in the playoffs, Lamar, but he's still there for now. If Lamar went to the NFC, I think he'd be the best quarterback immediately, probably. We have Aaron Rodgers now. Deshaun Watson, I don't think last year's form, as a Bengals fan, I hope that's his true form, but I don't think that's going to be his true form. That's like 8 guys who are like insanely good at football. If Watson gets back to form at some point, and we're not even mentioning guys like Tua and Russ. So I think you really need to shoot for the stars to think about competing in the AFC. So the remaining quarterbacks we have here for Houston, we have C.J. Stroud, Will Levis, and Anthony Richardson. Now, I am not the largest fan of all time of any of these guys. However, I think that you need to take one of them if you're Houston because you cannot guarantee Caleb Williams next year. I think he's the prize, but there are so many things that can happen that if you don't take a quarterback this year, you can't guarantee that you're going to get one that's worth a damn next year. So I made comparisons for all of these guys. Stroud, I think Stroud is pretty comparable to Dak Prescott. Which is, also why I say he could step in and be a top 5 guy in the NFC. However, Dak Prescott's probably like the 8th or 9th best guy in the AFC, so that scares me a bit. Will Levis, I think, on a high end, is Matt Stafford. But I also think that's like Will Levis's end game is like Matt Stafford's best years, and I don't know if we're gonna see that off rip. And in an AFC where you might need to be more impatient, I don't know. Uh, just to try and succeed. Now we have Anthony Richardson, who, admittedly, I watched a good bit of Florida Gators football because of the sports gambling thing that's really been blowing up lately. And I was the Anthony Richardson fade god. However, this dude is ridiculous, both in all of his physical attributes. I think he's the most athletically talented, gifted quarterback prospect we've seen since Cam Newton, and he has a absolute rocket arm. Now, I faded Florida a bunch because the offense. I can't quite say if the offense wasn't just suited to Richardson or if he really, really, really did struggle with accuracy, because that's totally a possibility. But even so, I think my comp for Richardson would be like, you know what? I will say it. I think Cam Newton, maybe a quicker but more frail Cam Newton, would be my comp for them. Now, if we're looking at those three options here, you can take Dak Prescott, you can take Cam Newton, and Cam Newton's vision is clouded a bit. Early Cam Newton, or maybe Matt Stafford if you're lucky. I'm taking Cam all day, and that's a guy who I think can step in and compete with all of the greats. Now, I think Richardson has the biggest chance to crash and burn, but at least you're going to crash and burn and not meddle at like 7 and 10 like you might with Stroud, and potentially even worse with Levis. That's my thought process. I rambled on about that for like 4 minutes, but that's like the most poignant thought I put together coming into this. But we're going to do Richardson at 2. Next pick, we're not going to spend that much time on. I'm going Jalen Carter. This dude is a stud. He's a beast. He's the best defensive player in the draft. I know nothing about him personally, so I'm going to assume things are all buttoned up there, but I'm going to take him. The Colts. Now, I just went on this whole rant about, throwing darts and seeing which ones hit. The Colts also, I think, need a quarterback very badly. They do not have this luxury of waiting around. Jobs are on the line, and you need to hope that one of these guys are better than I think they are. Because if they are what I think they are, you might win the AFC, South if, Trevor Lawrence has a down year, but you're not winning Super Bowls. But I think CJ Stroud has a better chance to just blow my Dak comparison out of the water and be something special. So I think he should be going here to the Colts. And the Seahawks are here with just the biggest grin on their face you've ever seen, because Will Anderson fell to them at 5. And I think that would just be a slam dunk for them. They need an edge. Perfect. The Lions now, picking at 6th. I think their offense was actually pretty great last year. I am a Jared Goff enjoyer. I'm a big J Goff lover. So I'm going to take defense here. I think that's something the Lions could have improved on a lot last year. Probably if they had some better defensive performances earlier in the season, they are in the playoffs and they make some noise. So I'm going to go ahead and do Devin Witherspoon. I think he's the best corner, the most versatile corner. I think he was very well tested in the Big Ten. I like Devin Witherspoon here. And then finally, the Raiders in the AFC. I say finally because this is going to be the last quarterback landing spot. We're going to do Levis. I know they have Garoppolo, but as we were talking about what quarterbacks can win the AFC, Garoppolo isn't even like on my radar top 10 ever, because we know what Jimmy Garoppolo is now, and we know what he's going to be. If he starts this year and it's a dumpster fire, because it will be, that's cool. What I kind of expect to happen, and hopefully the GM doesn't really get canned for this, but he did hire McDaniels, is I kind of hope that Jimmy G and McDaniels just blow up into flames. Levis at least got to sit there for a year, and he gets a reset for his second full year in the league. And, maybe you get to see some Mahomes magic there for sitting for a year. Because Levis isn't bad. He has this absolute cannon arm, which is why I said his high end is Stafford. And I think Stafford could be a guy who could win the AFC West, even with Mahomes in there, depending how the Chiefs continue to team build down the line. So I don't dislike him by any means. I think 7's high for a lot of people to take Levis. But I'm taking him here to the Raiders. And if this year just stinks, like it's probably destined to, I think Levis could benefit a lot. And that just absolute beautiful arm is going to do numbers for them. And then the Falcons, I think you could go edge or corner here. And between both of them, I think Christian Gonzalez is the best overall player left on the board. So I'm going to take them, or him. You have A.J. Terrell and Christian Gonzalez. I think that can just be a absolutely disgusting secondary, and something that Atlanta can really hang their hat on, especially with the additions they made in the offseason. Jesse Bates, Calais Campbell, Bud Dupree. That's going to be a defense that a lot of people, especially, Bryce Young now in division, aren't going to want to face. Now, the offense probably will score like 12 points a game with Desmond Ridder, but, at least the defense is going to be locked down, and maybe if you stink that bad, you'll have a chance at Williams next year. So now the Bears at number 9. We're going to go Paris Johnson. Justin Fields, help my man Justin Fields out. He needs it, good Lord. If he keeps running like that, he will not last much longer in this league. It's a strength of his, but it shouldn't be the entire offense. So we have Paris Johnson here coming to the Bears. And next with the Eagles, I'm going to do something that I think a lot of people have a lot of difficulty drafting for the Eagles. Excuse me. It's because they were such a loaded team last year, and Hurts still was on a rookie contract. He got that big extension this offseason. But that offense, or that team last year, was just a dominant roster. And you could restock the cupboard a bit, but most of the star cast is back in Philly. The defensive line, I think, is still very strong. The secondary still has, your star players in it that were there last year. I think the defense is okay. And the offensive line for this year is fine. Let's throw a dart at a player that I think gives you the best chance to win a Super Bowl this year. And for me, that's Jackson Smith-Njigba. You have your two outside guys in A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. They're going to lock that down, and they're great at that role. Let's get an elite slot. They got Zacchaeus from Atlanta. I forget his first name. It starts with an O. I'm not going to try it. But Jackson Smith-Njigba is a big upgrade there, and that offense is just gross with him in it, in my opinion. I think that would really be a big improvement, and just giving Jalen Hurts as many weapons as possible. It's just disgusting. Tennessee now at 11. I think their defensive line could use a bit of work. We're going to go Tyree Wilson. I don't know why he's so low on PFF's board. He is just... I think Vrabel is a perfect guy for him to go to, just because of how much of a... You can use the word ball of clay to describe him, because he has so many physical tools, but I don't even know if he's your traditional ball of clay, because he did produce in college, and he was a really effective player at Texas Tech, but just the physical traits over in Vrabel's system, I like that a lot as well. Let's talk about another ball of clay here at pick 12 for Houston. I'm going to go Lucas Van Ness. Now, this dude did not play football very much at Iowa, which is, a little sad, but also the Iowa football program is very, very, very weird. And I'm not really going to question that, but I know with my eyes, as a Big Ten football fan, that Lucas Van Ness is the truth. He didn't play too much, but he is very young entering this draft. I believe he was a redshirt sophomore, the earliest you can come out. And he's just, when he was on the field, he made the most of it. The Iowa defense was on the field more than most teams because of how little their offense did, and they were still one of the better defenses in college football last year. I think, if not the best. You see what they did to Kentucky. Granted, without Will Levis, but they shut them out in the bowl game. an SEC opponent. But I think Lucas Van Ness, not on the field in certain key downs, but I think when he was on the field, he was gross. He was very good and made the most of it. So Lucas Van Ness here. Green Bay, this is also something a little unprecedented, but I think with the receiver position and with JSN off the board, I think he's the no-brainer pick to be their slot receiver if he's there on draft night. He's not in my world, so we're going to switch it up, and we're going to take a tight end here. My favorite tight end, Michael Mayer, out of Notre Dame. I like what the Packers have on the outside right now with Christian Watson, with Romeo Doubs, and then we add a really good pass-catching and blocking. I think he's more of a do-it-all type of tight end. Michael Mayer going here to Green Bay. I think it's a little early for a lot of folks, but for me, I think it's a pretty good selection for Green Bay to just add a weapon for Jordan Love. It doesn't really matter what kind. If you prioritize a better outside receiver, if you want to do like a Zay Flowers here, that doesn't upset me. Or a Quentin Johnston, that's interesting and maybe a little redundant with Watson. But I think Jordan Love just needs a weapon to be added, and I think Michael Mayer is my favorite on the board right now. Patriots, let's go with just a freaky dude, and that's Nolan Smith. Oh my, this dude would just test it off the charts. They're not going to show it here because I don't pay for PFF anymore. Let's see, he had 190 grade against Florida, which, I don't know how much that says this year. I don't think they have his draft stuff on here. He's a small guy, but oh man, he is quick. He is so quick. His 40 time was fantastic. He can get around guys very well. I think Nolan Smith is a guy that Bill Belichick is just drooling to have, and really putting him opposite of Matt Judon. I think pass rush could really become a strength in New England again, adding him. And what New England really needs is a strength, because I think they're really just middling in a lot of areas because you're kind of stuck with Mac Jones at the moment. But if you really add some really strong pieces of that defense, like a Nolan Smith type, I think that could mean the world. The Jets now, we're going to go ahead and take an offensive lineman, and my personal favorite here is Darnell Wright. I guess I could say I'm a Darnell Wright lover. I think he's great. I think he blows people off the ball in the run game, which, they have Rodgers now, but they also have Breece Hall, remember, who, is a really, really good football player. And he can step into that pass blocking role a little more, but I really like what I saw from Darnell Wright with his SEC schedule. I think he's very talented, and he's my second favorite tackle in this class behind Paris Johnson. So he's going to New York. Washington, I think a weapon here is warranted as well since all the quarterbacks are gone. I think you could take a dart throw at Hendon Hooker in the second, potentially maybe even the third, depending how you feel about him. But weapon-wise, I think my favorite guy is Dalton Kincaid here. God bless, what's his name, that tight end they have there. Logan, he's the Virginia Tech guy. Let's see. Commanders, Logan Thomas. Sorry, that was a real point of this talking in the video where I just, don't have it back yet. God bless Logan Thomas. He was my fantasy tight end a couple too many times. But I think they could really upgrade there. They haven't really had a guy since Jordan Reed was healthy that you're really excited about in Washington. I think Kincaid in the passing game can be one of those guys. Pair him with Terry, Curtis. That's going to be a good group there in Washington. I think a lot of people would say maybe a little early for Kincaid too. I don't think so. Let's go to Pittsburgh now. This is just a pick that makes sense to me. We're going to go Joey Porter. Steelers need a DB because they lost Cam Sutton, because all the Steelers can really seem to do is lose all of their good DBs they develop after they develop them. And so we'll do that again with Joey Porter. I think, the connection is pretty obvious in Pittsburgh. And, as a Bengals fan, there's a bit of hatred towards the Porter family, but I think Joey Porter's a really good corner, and I think just him in Pittsburgh makes a lot of sense, not just because of the family, but the need and his talent level as well. But the family, connection helps. He stays in state. He'll be a immediate fan favorite, and I think all those things are kind of important. The Lions, you address secondary. My remarks remain true on the defensive side of the ball that we need to address. Let's go to the defensive line now, and let's add Kalijah Cansey at a Pitt. This dude, it's hard not to compare him to Aaron Donald. Not in the way that I think he will be Aaron Donald, but you're undersized defensive tackle who can get after the quarterback from Pitt. The parallels just write themselves, and he's not gonna be Aaron Donald, but you're just hoping, with your undersized, pass rushing defensive tackle, you're hoping he's like a more talented version of Ed Oliver. I think that's something that you could really hope for out of this pick in Detroit. And I think if you get that, the more upside, because Cansey is just a freak too as far as his measurables go, looking at what he's done in his body of work, not only at Pitt, but at the Combine. I think Cansey is just a slam dunk here for Detroit. I don't know how Pete Skoronski fell so far. It's just how the board shook up. He probably should be a Steeler right now, in all honesty, if Joey Porter's name was like something else, to be honest. But I guess, because I made them do that, this is going to make a lot of sense for the Bucs to do. Again, this video is going off the rails. I don't know. Peter Skoronski, there's no world he falls to pick 19, but I guess he did there. I guess you're giving Baker Mayfield some protection, I suppose. I think the Bucs are going to stink next year, in all honesty. I'm a big Baker fan of the person, not the player. So hopefully he can bounce back. But man, going from Tom to Baker and or Kyle Trask, that's Trask. Good Lord. I'm sorry, Kyle Trask. I didn't mean that, please. But there you go. Pick 20 for Seattle. This is another one I can see people saying, well, that's a little rich for my blood. But I think it's a pretty good selection. Let's go with Cyrus Torrence out of Florida here. I think the Seahawks, their receiving group is very sound right now with what they have. You have DK Lockett. You got Kenneth Walker in the backfield. The tight end group I like a good bit in Seattle. Let's bolster that offensive line more. Their tackles are sound. I think they could use another guard and a center perhaps. But I think Torrence is the best interior offensive lineman in this class. It might be a little early for him, but Seattle's next pick, I don't have it right down here, but I think Torrence is probably gone by that point. And I think he's a good bit ahead of all the other interior offensive linemen in this class. So a bit of a reach, I think, is okay to draft your guy at the position. So here's Miami's pick. They forfeited it because Mike McDaniels was drooling on the sideline or something. I think I saw that joke somewhere. So that's what I'm going to say happened. And then we go to the Chargers now. And I think now it's time for Mr. Johnston to come off the board. And this offense just makes me drool with excitement. Just thinking about the physicals of these guys. You have Keenan Allen, who admittedly is getting older, and I don't know how much longer he will be in LA, but he hasn't really dropped off yet. But Quentin Johnston being that guy for Justin Herbert, because they just have these receivers every year that come in and are just kind of whatever. And Herbert, once a game, just finds one of them just streaking down the field, and because of his arm, he just drills them for like a 60-yard touchdown. I feel like that happens all the time watching Chargers games. I feel like that is like a perfect role for Quentin Johnston. Mike Williams is the contested catch guy on this team, despite Johnston being so tall. I just want Johnston to go into that role that some of those guys on the Chargers had. You're gonna sprint down the field and I'm going to find you because my arm is better than the DBs are at, staying on you. And I think that adds an element of consistency to the Chargers offense that is just gross. It would just be disgusting to add that, in my opinion. Let's go to Baltimore now. I think they could go, receiver is, the obvious need. But I also think there's just, if you adding a Jordan Addison or, I think Zay Flowers could make sense here, but he's so tiny. That worries me a bit. But, I like Odell there. I like Rashad Bateman there. So let's not add Zay. Let's add just a player that I think the Ravens will get the absolute most out of, an edge rusher, Myles Murphy. I think you could go corner or edge here. But the Ravens are so good at this game they do where they draft an edge rusher that we're not super sure about, and then they make them this insane player, and they leave and get millions of dollars in 4 years. And I think Murphy's got to be more proven than all of those guys. They've done this with those success stories already. Put him next to Odafe Owe, and that's just going to be an absolute, an absolute. Yeah, I'm praying Orlando Brown as a Bengals fan is as good as advertised, because, oh man, that is not going to be fun to block. If Myles Murphy is what we saw, before this year, that's the big thing with him, is he was great, and then this year he kind of wasn't. If they can get him back to that, oh man, that's just going to be so much fun. Vikings need a corner in the worst way. I think Andrew Booth is there, and he was hurt all last year, but I really couldn't tell you another corner on that roster right now. So let's go to Deonte Banks. He's a very good corner out of Maryland, very well tested, good measurables. I like a lot about Deonte. Let's give him to Minnesota. I think that one's kind of a no-brainer if he's there at 23. Jags, I think interior offensive line is important. They already add Calvin Ridley this offseason alongside Christian Kirk and the guys there last year. Evan Ingram's breakout out of nowhere. I think you can thank Trevor Lawrence for that, being an actual good quarterback. Let's add more offensive line now on top of that. And let's do a center that I absolutely love out of Minnesota, John Michael Schmitz. He is just so solid and sure. He's going to step into that center position in Jacksonville, and he's going to play there for, if he gets a second contract, he'll be there for 10 years. I don't know, he's probably not going to be, the best center in football, but I think he's very sound. And I think just getting that stability and a very, very good pick there for Jacksonville. New York now, I think they, wide receiver is a kind of an evident need for them, but the cupboard it's not empty there. You just open the cupboard and there's a lot of spam in the cupboard, or some canned vegetables that you're not super high on. Maybe some ramen. That's really what's in the cupboard for them. But I don't know if you can necessarily say Jordan Addison or Zay Flowers or, oh man, who else at the receiver position is someone to be looking at in this position? Josh Downs, Jalen Hyatt. If any of those guys really fix the problem they have there necessarily. I do like Zay a lot, but let's work on that defense a little more. Let's just add a playmaker. And I think Brian Branch definitely could be a nice addition. He's so versatile. I think he can play, everyone's saying he can play safety, he can play inside, he can play nickel. I think he could even play outside. I think that's how highly I look at Brian Branch. He'd probably come in and play safety here beside McKinney in New York, and I think he'd be a very great playmaker there right away. But he can fill into other roles as well. And I think Brian Branch is a very quality but versatile pick for a Giants team that, you're not really sure where they go next after giving Daniel Jones the bag. It's puzzling, but also, you got to try and get the most value out of these picks that you have after making a move like that. The Cowboys, I think they very much could address their defensive line here, that defensive interior in particular. My favorite of the guys is Bryan Bresee, in the same reason that I really like Myles Murphy. Bresee was just absolutely dominant, and this guy just, I really feel for him with some of the crap he had to go through, because we're all people, we're all humans at the end of the day, and Bryan Bresee had to go through some of the most crap out of a lot of humans. And he is a human being, and I really feel for him. His sister passed away, is no longer with us, and so that I cannot imagine what that had to go through. He had some either an illness or an injury or something I remember that was plaguing him as well. I think if Bryan Bresee can get back to what we saw at the beginning of Clemson, which I think he can, I hope he is that. He has that toughness in him, and I'm cheering for the guy. Rare that I cheer for a Clemson guy, but I'm cheering for Bryan Bresee. If he can get back to that, putting him on that defensive interior next to DeMarcus Lawrence and next to Micah Parsons, good Lord, that would be disgusting. Okay, the Bills. I think the Bills probably need to go corner here. You have Trey White, but also Trey White's kind of injury prone, and behind him you have Dane Jackson and Kaiir Elam, both of which I don't know. I am a Kaiir Elam truther, but even then you could use another DB to round things out, as a voice crack horribly there. So I think the guys I'm looking at, we're probably looking at Cam Smith, DJ Turner, or Tyreek Stevenson. I'm not really an Emmanuel Forbes lover, which means the Bengals will take him in round one, because that's how it goes. For me, I just think, it's either got to be Smith or Turner, and I'm just going to show DJ Turner some love, because I think the guys above him probably get a little more love, but I think DJ Turner is such a good corner out of Michigan. Watching how he defended some of these tough battles in the Big Ten, your Marvin Harrisons, even though Ohio State was a bit off that game, your Parker Washingtons. There was some good competition that Turner faced. Not saying Cam Smith or Emmanuel Forbes didn't, because they totally did. But I just think DJ Turner's body of work and what he's able to do as a player is a bit underrated. And so I'm going to take him a little early, but plug in if you hate DJ Turner the player, Bills fans, just use your imagination and plug in any of these guys that you want, except Kelee Ringo, because he's probably not very good in my opinion. That one could come back to bite me, but we're just gonna leave that one there for now. Bengals. Apparently Jonah Williams doesn't want to play football for the Bengals anymore, and Broderick Jones is just sitting here. So if that's the case, I mean that's kind of a no-brainer. La'el Collins is out, and we could get some value. We could get like a third for Jonah during this draft. Especially if Broderick falls and you're sitting there with him on your board so high, you're gonna go, I think we're gonna go with Broderick, and Jonah, you can walk like you want. We'll get you somewhere nice. We'll get a third-round pick for you, and maybe that can be a tight end that a lot of people say they need so much, or some defensive depth because of some of the guys who walked during the offseason. But I think Broderick Jones is a guy you can kind of hang your head high and say, okay, we got Orlando Brown, we have Broderick Jones, we signed those guys last offseason. We finally have an offensive line next to Joe Burrow that we can feel really good about. They're Cordell Volson taking a big jump from being like a top 5 offensive line with Broderick Jones, in my opinion. So we'll rock with that. Saints, I think it's time for the Zay Flowers slander to stop. I don't know if Michael Thomas will really play football in any meaningful way for the Saints anytime soon. Again, he keeps almost doing it. I don't know. But pairing, even if he does play, Zay Flowers, Michael Thomas, Chris Olave is absolutely disgusting. Rashid Shaheed is a good, I believe I said his name right, is a really good fourth receiver. All things considered, him coming in and stretching the field like he does. But I think Zay Flowers is more versatile than Shaheed, and I think he could really step in and be an impact player. I worry about his size, to be honest, but there's nothing else about him that I worry about. Also a 53 grade against UConn. That's never something you like to see. But yeah, look at that. And his confidence, he oozes confidence. He, made some good plays at the Shrine Bowl. As a mock draft guy, I have to watch his Brett Coleman interview, as every, good little mock draft boy and girl must do. And I'm not as high on Zay as most, mainly because of his frame and, maybe his potential upside. But I think this fall is plenty, especially just because I can't mock him to the Chiefs without, crying, because that would just be very sad for me, and I just don't want to manifest that in any way, that evil that could potentially put on the rest of the AFC. Talking about these teams up near the top, your Texans and your Colts, maybe competing someday, your Raiders. Nah, if Zay Flowers goes to the Chiefs, there will be not much competing going forward. The Eagles, like I talked about before, they're such a complete team. Let's do Bijan here. He's fell quite enough. I think Bijan. I have my Joe Mixon jersey on right now. I don't know what's wrong with me doing that as a bit of a weirdo. Mo Sports Network, and I'm not that Mo Sports Network, but I'm a running backs don't matter kind of guy. Despite having that jersey, I don't know why I would wear it ever again, given what's going on with Mixon right now. We're going to forget about that part of the video and just move on to Bijan. This dude is just so good. I mean, other than Saquon, he's got to be the best guy that's come out in a minute. I really can't think of anyone, in a while that I was as impressed with as Bijan. So, him going here, plugging in an Eagles team that's really missing a lot of that running back position, I think that it fits perfectly. And then the Chiefs, I was talking about Zay Flowers, but I think this team needs a receiver so bad. I don't think Sky Moore is going to take that big step. He made some plays in the Super Bowl, but I just don't see that giant step coming. So it's MVS there is kind of the guy. And I think you need to add something else alongside him, because just him and Kelce, I don't know if that's quite enough, personally, especially after losing Orlando Brown. They did get Jawan Taylor. That's not an upgrade, though, I'll say that much. So let's go Jordan Addison. His slides fell far enough as well. Jordan Addison, I think he's a very solid receiver. And what he did at USC, I think a lot of, I wouldn't say prospect fatigue on him, because I just think your Zays, your Quentins, your JSNs are more deserving of that high pick. But I think Jordan, at the end of the day, probably is a first rounder. So we're going to go ahead and draft him here. And oh boy, look at me. I just talked for 40 minutes and only said like 50 times. So I guess there's a look at the mock there. It's probably, starting with Anthony Richardson, this already wasn't going to happen. But this is just kind of my opinion. If you see this video, you can talk about it in the comments. Keep it fun and fruitful down there. But this is just what I think. And if you disagree with me, you probably should, because I probably didn't do nearly as much research as I could have on this mock. But this is just what I think. And I think this would be a really fun draft, personally. And I had a lot of fun, throwing this together. So if you guys enjoyed, thank you guys so much. Go ahead and drop a like. I don't really plan on making many more videos, but if you beg enough, if you ask nicely, maybe I will. But I'd probably need to stay a little more humble, saying that people would, to even question that people would be begging me for more content. So that's going to be it for me. I've talked much long enough. Thank you guys for watching. I'm Andrew, and I'll see you guys, maybe next year for Mock Draft 2024, baby.